This is the Hasselblad X2D, and lately it's been one of the most surprising and rewarding cameras that I've been able to use over the last few months. And now look, when you're talking about an $8,000 medium format solution, you're really talking to a small group of photographers. But there are some innovations here that I feel aren't talked about enough in the imaging space. I put this camera to the ultimate test where it would sit in a key position in my personal documentary work. And after using it and really pushing this thing across many cities, it came to me that this camera ultimately over-delivers on three key aspects: optical performance, user experience, and what I want to talk about first, image quality. Look, I've used every major camera system and every manufacturer has their version of reality. And after using this, I really believe that this sits at the top when you think about color accuracy. Reds and skin tones feel exactly as you perceive them. Greens, they have this healthiness to them, this freshness to them. And the blues, they have a touch more vibrancy than what you'd see, but it doesn't feel unnatural. Whether it was another photographer or just a casual, I was met with the same amount of amazement when I showed these images right from the camera. They call it the Hasselblad Natural Color Solution, or HNCS, but they could have just called it reality because that's what it feels like. You know, when I got this camera and the product briefing and I started my research, I had this healthy amount of skepticism. I mean, how good could it really be? Turns out it's really f***ing good, especially in a country like India where you're constantly being bombarded with all kinds of colors. It's refreshing to know that when you shoot on something like this, you're getting the best representation of what you're perceiving. Or maybe what I should say is I'm getting the best starting point that I've ever used. Now, on top of color accuracy, you also have the overall quality of the image, where depth and contrast come together to produce something that's larger than life. When you position yourself right, you have a result that feels theatrical in nature. With a sensor that's 70% larger than full frame, which I'm sure you've heard of before, you have the opportunity to produce these stunning files that really feel different from results you'd get on another camera. And I say opportunity because it still requires work from the photographer to position the sensor in the right situation. You can capture these 16-bit RAW files that pack a ton of color information. We're talking about trillions of colors, and in the best situation, up to 15 stops of dynamic range. And even if you're a pixel peeper, you can punch right in and see all that beautiful micro contrast that brings your subject to life. The ISO ranges from 64 to 25,600, and for me, I found myself either sticking the ISO at 64 or setting a ceiling of 1600. Now, you can go higher and have a higher ceiling and still get a great result, but for this camera, this sensor, and what I was capturing, I would try to keep the ISO as low as possible so I could get the best result in the moment. Oh, and in the instance you want a smaller, more manageable file to quickly edit and share, the latest firmware allows you to capture these high efficiency image files that you can use to just keep the file size a little bit smaller on the go. The opportunity to capture the most true to life representation of what's in front of you, at least if you're asking me, is the main reason you'd look to invest in a camera like this, especially if you spend much of your work capturing portraits, still life, landscapes, and architecture. You have a body here that often delivers those holy shit experiences right after you press the shutter. The user experience of the Hasselblad X2D might be one of the most criminally underrated features of this camera. Let's start with the physical experience first. You have this angled pistol grip that is deep, natural, and allows your hand to wrap into the grip itself, where it doesn't sit flat and uncomfortable. The shutter button is positioned perfectly and delivers a satisfying click. On the top, you have this smaller color LCD that tells you what your settings are at. But what I also appreciate is that when the camera is off and you plug it into charge, it has a battery icon that pops up to let you know what your battery life is at. And because of this, I found myself charging the camera more like a phone, where I would just plug it in and let it sit there until it was fully charged. There are two customizable buttons on the top of the camera camera, but I found myself leaving them to their original setting, which is mode selection and ISO and white balance. Oh, and before I continue, I love the fact that one of these customizable buttons can be designating two features where I can use it for ISO, or if I press it again, it goes to white balance. I feel like this is just an ingenious way to add a little bit more functionality without necessarily adding more buttons. So kudos to Hasselblad for figuring that out. You also have two command dials. The rear one can actually be pushed in for another customizable shortcut. For me, I use this to activate the focus selection tool, which I can then use to move the focus selection point up, down, or left to right. On the front of the camera, you have that obvious shutter release button, but there's also another customizable button. For this one, I have it set for the face detect autofocus mode. This is a brand new feature with the latest firmware from Hasselblad, and just a slight tangent here, it works really well. I was a little bit nervous when they told me about this thing. I'm like, well, how good is it gonna be in the field? Turns out it's really good. Even in some trickier, contrasty environments, this would lock into a face and hold the position. It wouldn't have that nervousness where it's jumping between a face and a point. No, if it saw a face, if you had the light there, it would hold that position and capture a great image, a lot of which you're seeing right now. Now, back to the body of this camera. This thing is designed interestingly well, where because the shutter isn't actually in the body, it sits in the lens of the Hasselblad system, you have a very slim profile. At 900 grams, or about 900 grams, this thing isn't super light, but because of how it's designed, that center of gravity sits closer to the grip. So when you're using it, it just makes for a more comfortable experience. I found that I could hand hold this thing for the bulk of the day and it wouldn't feel like I'm fighting against it when I bring it up to my eye to take a photo. And let's just call a spade a spade. This is a beautifully designed camera. It has these elegant curves. It is something that when you look at, you wanna hold, you wanna use, and in case you forgot, it has an X2D made in Sweden right at the top. A subtle, let's just call it tip of the cap to where this is from. Moving to the back of the camera, there is no directional pad. You have just this clean, sweeping, elegant design where your thumb can rest and you don't have to worry about accidentally hitting a shortcut or menu. This might be bothersome for some people. I like this, and especially when you add to the fact that the touchscreen works incredibly well to select a focus point or navigate menus. Up near the viewfinder, you also have the standard exposure lock and focus lock buttons. You can also customize these if needed. I gotta call out the back LCD because I showed this to several people as I was testing this thing. It is big, it is bold, it is beautiful. It is something you notice right away. At 3.6 inches and 2.36 million dots, it makes for an incredible viewing experience of your photography in the field. It really does feel premium. Toward the side, you have an easy navigation of buttons for playback, confirm, cancel, or menu that just allows you to get in and out of the camera really quickly. The back LCD does have a tilting functionality, but it doesn't hit that magical 180 degrees, which in some situations left me wanting more. But let's go back to that touchscreen. It is one of the most responsive screens on a camera. It feels like a smartphone. It feels like when I'm navigating this thing, I'm navigating an iPhone display. It is that responsive, that accurate, and I love the fact that you can navigate the entire menu system with a touchscreen. There's also a 5.76 million dot OLED viewfinder with a 1.0 magnification, and it has a very comfortable entry point for your pupil. It is one of the most beautiful viewing experiences on a camera. And look, as easy as it would be for me to drive up the word count with more adjectives about this viewfinder, let me just say it is fucking phenomenal and leaves nothing to be desired. I guess I did kind of drive up the word count there, didn't I? Wrapping up the design of this camera, you have a switch and push release mechanism for the battery, and to the left of the camera, you have a slot for a CF Express Type B card and USB-C. So that's the design and build of this camera, but let's talk about the Hasselblad user interface. They use this iconographic menu system that doesn't have these overly complex sub-menus to get to where you need to go. It is at least right now, the simplest and easiest menu system on a photo solution. I found myself just being able to get to what I need very quickly, and it's something that for pro photographers makes an inviting experience when you're shooting with it. Now, let's jump into some of the specifics of what this camera can do. The Hasselblad X2D delivers a staggering 1 terabyte of internal storage that is noticeably, I'm talking about 7 times faster than writing to the card slot. And with this setup, I found myself using the camera a little bit differently. When I wanted to download photos, I would just plug the camera directly into my laptop, where 2 drives would show up, one for the internal storage, one for the card. And I would just drag and drop to start my editing process. Now, that is really cool, really easy, but I have to talk about something else that's even more impressive, and that is the Hasselblad app. To my surprise, the Hasselblad Focus app is incredible. After the initial pairing, anytime you launch the app and turn on the camera, you'll just have a drop down that says, hey, your camera's nearby. Do you want to connect? You hit connect now, and because of that advanced Wi-Fi chip, it connects reliably and stays connected. From here, you can view all your images on the camera. You can download them to your phone very quickly, including those high-resolution 16-bit RAW files. From here, you can even use a plethora, I use that word with intention, folks. You can use a plethora of tools to edit your image within the app. And from here, you can then save it to your album. And what's also neat is that Hasselblad has these interesting borders with their branding to share your image. It's just a cool, nice little feature to have, and in some instances, a great way to flex on the haters. I gotta talk about the image stabilization in this camera, because they say it's about 7 stops, and that's genuinely what I felt. I could comfortably shoot with this camera at 1/25 or even 1/10 of a second and get a great image. But take a look at this boring photo from my hotel room, where I'm sitting on the other side and I'm taking a photograph of the door. This is at half a second, and you see the text and the map here, it is legible. This is impressive, folks. I found this to be quite surprising. So yeah, when they say 7 stops of image stabilization, that's what you're getting. Autofocus on this camera is good for the subjects that a camera like this would excel at: portraiture, still life, landscape, and architecture. Paired with the new 90V lens, I found it to be plenty fast and not show any of that crazy hunting. The phase detect system was reliable in well-lit environments. Where it struggles is when there's a noticeable drop in contrast or just very low ambient light. For a medium format solution, this autofocus is plenty good. When it came to battery life, I found myself charging it maybe once every 2 or 3 days. I would turn this camera on, and yes, it would go into a sleep mode in between sessions, but I would capture about 150 to 160 images a day, and again, I would only charge it every 2 or 3 days. So I found this to be a really reliable solution when it comes to battery life. Oh, and I have to mention this, there is no video on this camera. It is an imaging tool through and through. It is precise, it is focused, and designed to give you the best images possible. So let's talk about how this camera can get better. I would love to see an update where user profiles, it actually sits in that main menu where you can hit one tap and go and choose a different user profile. I switch between one profile where it is locked at ISO 64 and it's more of a manual mode, and another profile that is aperture priority and allows for a ceiling of ISO 1600. So just having this more front and center to easily toggle between, that would be a great upgrade. Next, and this is gonna sound a little bit crazy, but let me just put it this way. You have a fantastic color solution here, right? One that represents life incredibly well with a high degree of accuracy. I would love to see Hasselblad have a little fun and design 2 new profiles that were similar to what Alexa does on their cinema cameras, where it takes the raw data and manages that pipeline to give you a slight variation on the image itself. Imagine a black and white profile and a more color cinematic profile, but these two new looks that were designed to be more analog in nature. It wasn't about accuracy, it was more about a specific feeling. Again, I have an appreciation for how hard this is and also the philosophies of Hasselblad. It's just something that I think would be pretty damn cool, even if it was integrated at the app level. If we're talking about the next version of this camera, I'd love to see this LCD tilt up all the way 180 degrees to really make for the photography experience easier in low angle situations, and also being able to have customizable shortcuts to both command dials. Again, not having a D-pad might alienate some photographers, and I didn't find it to be an issue for the work that I'm doing. But because of the innovations and what Hasselblad is kind of known for, it'd be cool if they integrated this sort of trackpad slash button that would introduce a new way to navigate and interact with your camera. It would also be awesome to have dynamic resolution changing, kind of like someone else in the market, where you could choose between 100, 50, or even 25 megapixels, but still have the full readout of the sensor. Now, more lenses are on their way to this system, but I guess my only ask here is bring them out sooner, especially after using the 90V and seeing what it can do. I'm excited to see the other kinds of lenses that Hasselblad can deliver to users. Oh, and this thing is just built like an elegant tank, and it never stopped me or gave me worry when I was shooting with it in the field. I would take it in the rain, I would take it in the dust. But I would love to see Hasselblad have more prominent messaging when it comes to weather resistance, even if it was to just instill a little bit more peace of mind for photographers in the field. With a host of new premium lenses that deliver exceptional optical quality from edge to edge, the Hasselblad X system is a premium imaging solution that will exceed expectations for those that want reference-style images. Or, to put another way, if you want to take the most accurate photo of what your eyes are seeing, I think this is the best system under $15,000 to do it with. The Hasselblad X2D is a precision tool that delivers a result that's only matched in quality by its user experience. It places an incredibly high priority on the idea of getting a great image and feeling incredible while doing it. And I need to stress how exceptional the software integration feels. It makes for a camera that you want to create and share with often. There are none of these technical, awkward hiccups that stifle the flow of creativity. You just point, shoot, and share. For those that find themselves in a position where they have the luxury of picking any tool for their storytelling, this is a camera that will appeal most to portrait, still life, landscape, architecture, and if you're like me, documentary photographers that demand the best result in the moment. So where have I landed with this camera? What do I genuinely feel about it personally? When I had this opportunity to work with this thing, to take it into the field, to use it for my line of work, I had a lot of hesitations. I didn't think it was going to be able to keep up. I thought the color science might be a bit of marketing, a bit of salesmanship on their part. And I genuinely felt like I would hit a point where it was holding me back and it just couldn't keep up. I was wrong on all three counts. This is an extremely versatile kit that didn't weigh me down. The colors out of camera were astounding, especially when it came to representing skin. And the camera kept up for everything I needed it to do. Look, the truth is, if this camera didn't do what I needed it to do, I would be leaving it at the hotel more often than not, and I would be even more strict in qualifying this in terms of who would actually value a product like this. But I found myself bringing it with me every single day, using it for those special moments where I had the time and light to create a compelling story in the moment. It's simply over-delivered, and because of how it's designed, it made me want to keep using it. And truth be told, that's probably the best thing I can say about the Hasselblad X2D. And there you have it. That is my review of the Hasselblad X2D, something I had an incredible time putting together. If you want to see these images in more detail, I'll leave a link to my photo club where you can go read this review and see those images. I got to give a shout out to my friend Shivam, who is behind the camera today and helped me in the field. He is an incredible photographer, fixer, and an incredible human that I have the pleasure of calling a brother and a friend. So please be sure to follow him and support his journey as well. As always, my name's Gajan. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.